Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to need you to really stretch your imagination for the start of this discussion. If you can, try. Just maybe you have to close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and imagine you're at a party. All right, there's a crowd of people around you. No one's wearing masks, and you don't know any of them. They're all strangers. But it's a party. You've got your cup in your hand, fill it with whatever you like, age appropriate for those who are youngsters. And you walk up to a stranger, or they walk up to you. What are they most likely to say as a greeting after they've done the how you doing, nice party kind of thing? What do you do? Right? What do you do? It's always, I think, a joke that we have the phrase, how do you do, as if anyone ever would say that again, when in fact what we usually say is, what do you do? What is the answer to that question? But what is the answer that the person is looking for? Your occupation, right? They are clearly shilling for the IRS, and they are checking to make sure that you have declared all of your income, and they need to make sure they know what job you're claiming as your occupation so they can compare it to the records. No, that's not it. Why do people ask you, what do you do, as the opening salvo of getting to know a stranger in these types of situations? Looking for something in common, because chances are your job and my job are the same, or the in common is that we're both employed, which is no longer a given, unfortunately, for many. What possible commonality are they hoping to establish by finding out what your job is in the opening minutes of a conversation? All right. All right, so I'm going to actually agree with Natan. Doesn't happen all the time, but I'm going to agree with Natan that I think for most people, they believe, that's where I'm just going to tweak it a little bit, they believe that your job is the quickest way to figure out not just what you do, but who you are. Because, as Natan mentioned, many people feel that your occupation is your identity, that there is a one-to-one correlation. If you tell me that you are a teacher, I now know everything I need to know about who you are because you told me that you're a teacher. If you tell me you're a doctor, I know who you are. If you tell me you're a lawyer, I know who you are. If you tell me that you wait tables at a restaurant, I know who you are. That's why I'm using this shorthand question of what do you do? Because I want to know who you are as quick as possible with the most complete answer with the fewest words. And occupation seems to be that shorthand. Michael, you had your hand up.
Yeah, but also it's a way of establishing social hierarchy.
And by extension, I now know who you are, and I know, even more importantly for many people, what you are worth. That this establishes social hierarchy. Oh, nice to meet you, person from the lower tax bracket. You should know I'm from the upper tax bracket. Now, that would be rude. That would be gauche to go around telling you what tax bracket you're in. But by massaging the conversation around jobs, it becomes very easy to establish who is where in the social pecking order, which is very important for those who think that where you are in the social pecking order is very important. It is a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the job becomes a critical element for establishing identity in those relationships. But I want to ask you about a big problem with this. What happens when someone retires? Does their identity disappear? Well, unfortunately, yes, for some. What do? Nothing. And enjoying every minute of it. Unfortunately, for many people, their identity is so wrapped up in their career, in their job, that when they retire, they don't know who they are anymore. They have lost sight of who they are. Plus, there are many people that, I think you may have heard about this, will occasionally have days off, or maybe even a vacation. Who are they when they're not at work? If who they are is entirely wrapped up in their occupation, then when they're not actually occupied in the occupation, do they exist? Right? If a doctor watches TV, is he still a doctor? If a lawyer goes to the beach, is he still a lawyer? And if he's not, then what is he? It's mind-blowing. How can I exist without the identity of my job? And I believe there are some people who work constantly just to make sure that they remind themselves that they exist, because they're not sure of who they are if they lack that activity. And when people change jobs, does that mean you become a different person? Is it even logical to imagine that by knowing that someone has a particular job that we think we actually know anything more useful about them than just where they happen to hang their hat when they're earning a paycheck? If I know that somebody is a mechanic, does that mean I know anything else about them? Do I know what their hobbies are? Do I know what their taste in music is? Do I know whether they're good to their dog or not? Or do I just know that they work on machines as a way to earn a living? Really, it's just the last.
It reminds me of the parsha this week, right? You're asking who's your slave owner, and then when you're retired, you're a freed slave.
And you're a freed slave. Should our existence then be like slavery? Through our occupation. Is an occupation really just a fancy phrase for wage slave? And then at some point we are liberated at the end of our 65, 67, 70 years, as opposed to being liberated every 7 years that the Torah said we were supposed to be set free. This is a crushing question. Well, perhaps there are better questions then to get to someone's identity. Because let's be honest, we do want to find out who people are. So let's imagine rather than being at this regular sort of generic party, we are at an international conference for whatever it is that we do. So we don't have to ask what you do, because everybody in the room does it. Right? Pick whatever topic you want to be, whether it be animator, whether it be doctor, whether it be mechanic. You're at an international convention. Now what are people going to ask? Where are you from? Where are you from? Because that's going to tell me who you are. Right? The passport you carry, that's your identity when you're in the international realm. Because clearly, every American is exactly the same as every American. Right? No? Right? Every person from Thailand is exactly the same as every other person from Thailand. And fill in any country you like. No, it's even more generic than it is to ask what your occupation is. There is even more diversity, obviously, among any country that has a massive population. Your passport is not your identity. All right, so let's move to another setting. You go to a big family reunion, one of those once every 50-year family reunions. And it's one of those reunions where you have eighth cousins and twice removes and people that you don't actually know all that well, or maybe at all. And you go to the family reunion and you bump into someone that you're really sure you don't know. What's the question going to be? What brings you here? The reunion. Who are you related to? So tell me, where are you on the family tree? Oh, well, I am grandpa so-and-so, second cousin's nephew, that by marriage and blah, blah. You get the relationship diagnostic. Finally, we've got something that tells me who they are. Right? Because their job doesn't really tell me who they are. Their nationality doesn't really tell me who they are. But if I know they are so-and-so's husband, if I know they are such-and-such's daughter, if I know they are so-and-so's second cousin, now I'm situated. Now I know who they are. No, no, I don't. As much as we like to focus on our relationships, and they are essential to how we live in our world and in our lives, our relationships don't define us. They describe us, but they don't define us. Meaning that it's helpful to know who's, related to who, especially if you're trying to watch what you say. Always make sure you know who's actually listening. But it doesn't actually tell me who that person is, the one that I am talking to right now. It just tells me what some distant connection they might have to some other person is. So if I want to know who a person is, what do I need to know? What do you do for fun? So I paint miniatures. Useful information? You know what I am now? No. But it's maybe a start. Maybe it's a start. It's outside of just a generic occupation title. It's outside of a generic passport. It's outside of a generic family title. It's giving you a little bit of a tidbit. And that tidbit might help you unwrap if you add it up with a lot of other tidbits. In fact, a lot of other tidbits that go back to our initial term. Usually when people are looking for how do I really define a person, it would be if I were legitimately going to answer the question, what do you do? Right? Not what's your title, not what's the label, not your passport, your family address or whatever, but what do you actually do? If I follow you around, if I decide to become a stalker in my spare time, and I follow you around and I catalog everything you actually do I know who you are now? Little better? I would argue no. I know what you do, but I don't know you. I can follow a pinball going through the table, bouncing off this bumper and that bumper, and I will know what it did. I could even, write a whole report about it. But that doesn't mean I actually know the pinball. I merely describe it. I haven't defined it. I haven't unlocked its essence. I may not even know why it did what it did, especially if it's some sort of trick mechanics. To get to that, we have to crack it open and really find the Mishpatim. We have to find the rules. We have to find what guides the person to do what they do or not do what they don't do. It is the rules that we choose that actually define us. Because mere action is not enough. Let me give you a quick example just to make sure that you're fully on board with that, because I can see some of you are thinking, but I was always told, watch what someone does, not what they say. And it's a little bit harder than just saying, what do people do? Imagine Mr. A has decided he is going to help his neighbor finally clean up that shed in the backyard. So he makes a date. Next Sunday, he is going to be over there to help clean up that shed. And Mr. B, also lives in the neighborhood, has decided finally, next Sunday he is going to take care of that neighbor's shed and he's going to burn the whole thing to the ground, and he doesn't care what gets destroyed in the process. Right? Mr. A wants to help clean it up. Mr. B wants to set fire to it and commit arson. But before Sunday rolls around, a sinkhole opens up. And the shed and all of its rubbish disappears into the sinkhole. Did Mr. A clean the shed? No. Did Mr. B set fire to the shed? No. So they're the same person. Because they did the same thing. They didn't clean the shed. They didn't burn the shed. They're both equal in their actions. So clearly, the actions tell me they're the same. And clearly, my gut tells me, no, they're not. Because for a person to have within them the willingness, the eagerness, the strength to say, I'm going to go help somebody who's having a problem to make their life better, even though it makes my life a little harder, clearly we want to say that person is different than the person who said, I'm going to go make my life a little more difficult so I can make someone else's life suffer because I think in the long run I'll be happier watching the flames. We want to believe that those are two different people, even though by their surface actions, the little stalker wouldn't be able to tell them apart. And so we have to come back to what were the rules they were following. What was it that made Mr. A want to go help? What made him feel that he should go help? What made Mr. B think that he had the right to set fire to someone else's shed? That he didn't have an obligation to help, that he wasn't responsible for making anything better, and he wasn't even responsible for following basic fire safety. The difference is each of them have chosen in their life to set different standards, different benchmarks, different rules, different mishpatim that they are going to follow in engaging their life. Now, both of them may fail to live up to it. Mr. B may get distracted and not set fire to anything just because it turns out there was something good on TV. And Mr. A may get distracted and not actually go and help that Sunday and push it down the road. But they are still two very different people. Who we are is defined by what we do and what we want to do, and why we wish to do it, and why sometimes we don't. But those are defined by the rules we choose to leave as the North Star, our lodestone, to drive us in our direction in life. It's not up to a whim. It's not just a casual experience. It's not just, oh, I'll do what I want. For even saying I'll do what I want is still setting that as a rule. It's not a very good one, by the way, but you are still setting a rule, that the only rule that matters is your whim of the moment. The Torah was given to us so we would have a set of rules that we could choose to follow, which we did, and I know you did, because else why are you here? And choose to use as that yardstick, as that benchmark, knowing that it would make our life better and knowing that it would define us more clearly than our job, our passport, or our relationships, or even what we do on an average day. By holding up and saying, I am who I am, because this is what guides me, we are making a statement that is much more powerful than what job you happen to have, or what country you happen to call home, or even who you happen to be connected to in your relationships. Strip all of those things away, and you are still you. You can lose your job, become a refugee, even, God forbid, lose all the people that are important to you. But if you know who you are because you have chosen the Torah as your rules, as your guide, even in those worst case scenarios, you are still you. And you will still get by. And you will still feel you, and you will still recognize you when you look in that mirror. And you will only grow in strength and clarity of self and purpose when you recognize that this is the way to define yourself. Chasing after occupational accolades is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be the best of your career. Chasing after beautiful relationships is perfectly fine, and being proud and supporting and engaged in your own country's politics, civic activities, and all of that is absolutely laudable and wonderful. But we don't hang our identity on that. Your identity is hung. Your identity is hung, English. Our identity is hung upon what you choose to hang it upon. Choose Torah. Choose the gift that God lovingly gave to us. And see that it will make you a better you, and a you that will withstand anything else that happens in the chaos of the world around you, and make you a blessing for those around you as well. Shabbat Shalom.